Good afternoon, and before John Ruff introduces today's speaker, Gloria Ruff, I just want to take a moment to thank both the Ruffs for all that they've done this year at the Brauer. So, you know John as the convener of this colloquium, but as some of you will have seen, he's also my right-hand preparator, and we gave you a sample of speed installation. So I want to assure you that speed installing is about as close to Julia Child's cooking as speed cooking is on those TV programs. So we were worried about height, but not about the lateral distance between pieces. And I think we may have got one height wrong. But, oh, there we go. The rapid takedown and put up each week makes, I think, one of the characteristics of this whole series of presentations, which is that we actually have the works up on a wall for you to see during the talk and to examine afterwards. So John and I install every show, and we take a lot more time and care than you saw this afternoon to get height and spacing correct. And then Gloria works down in the basement for me. She comes in regularly, and she keeps the registrarial work on track, the recording of the art that comes in, the gifts that we've received. It's so important to have accurate records of not just the identification and the sizes and dimensions and locations, but the knowledge of when the gift arrived and from whom and what the restrictions are in that gift and bequest. And Gloria has continued, since I've been here, to do that work for me. It was work that she did for over 25 years. From Richard Brauer. Okay, so I'll not trespass any further, other than I wanted you to know how indebted I am to both John and Gloria for the work they've done in this past year. And you see, speed and stalling, I still have the torpedo level. So over to you, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good afternoon. Today we conclude our third season of Thursdays at the Brauer with a gallery talk by photographer Gloria Ruff. That is one of Gloria's photographs. It's part of the permanent collection of the museum. It's from a show that she had in 1991 with artist Dwayne Neal in the law school. Gloria Ruff is in the house Gloria helped to build and to maintain. Truth to tell, under former director Greg Hertzlieb, good man that he was, she ran it. Gloria is the only person alive who has served each of the directors of the Brauer Museum of Art, this over a period of time approaching 30 years. She was Richard Brauer's assistant when Valparaiso University Museum came out of the catacombs and entered this lovely facility that was then named for Richard. One of the cruelties this university suffered because of the pandemic was the closing of the Brauer Museum, at which time both the director's position and Gloria's position as registrar and associate curator were eliminated. Gratefully, the Brauer has reopened with a terrific new director, and if you visit the Brauer's headquarters downstairs, now and again you may spy Gloria Ruff, independent contractor Gloria Ruff, doing the registrarial work that Richard Brauer trained her to do. Jonathan still calls the room where Gloria worked Gloria's office, which is only fitting and a great indication of Jonathan's graciousness and wisdom and respect for this institution and those who created and maintained it. Today, Gloria speaks to us as a photographer. She'll tell you about herself as a photographer during her talk. I get to give her brief biography. Gloria was born in Elmhurst, Illinois, but grew up in Austin, Minnesota, the home of Hormel Meats and the birthplace of Spam. Real Spam that you can sink your teeth into, not the digital kind. Gloria had just completed her first year at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design when we got married and moved to Rome, Italy, where I got my first teaching job. In Rome, Gloria studied art at John Cabot College, affiliated with Hiram College in Ohio, then at the American College of Rome, affiliated with Tusculum University in Tennessee. In Rome, one of Gloria's teachers, sculptor Herzl Emanuel, a student of Jacques Lipschitz, brought visitors to his studio to see Gloria's work. Her Latin teacher, Reginald Foster, was the Pope's Latinist. From Rome, we moved to Central Point, Oregon, which is a logical move, where our two daughters were born. There, Gloria, in her spare time, studied printmaking at Southern Oregon State College under the painter Betty LeDuc, for whom Gloria, decades later, would curate two major exhibitions, which resulted in Betty donating to the museum a large collection of her work, including the very large acrylic paintings that adorn the hallways of the Arts and Sciences building, the entrance to Muller Hall, and hallways upstairs in this building where our art department now resides. Gloria is again doing sculpture, carving in alabaster, and creating three-dimensional works from found objects. Here at VU, she learned how to use a 4x5 camera from Amy Tomaszek, and we now have a darkroom in our basement so she can develop her film and print her own black and white photos. My PhD should also have her name on it. She helped me earn it by teaching members of special populations in Seattle learn to swim, boys with hemophilia at the Children's Hospital, aquaphobic adults, men and women afflicted with intellectual disabilities. Even one of my teachers who did not have intellectual disability as far as we know. She worked for Catholic Charities. She was a teacher's aide. And at home, she knitted professionally, included the pockets she designed for a sweater that was worn at Keith Richards' wedding in Brazil. Did I mention she raised her two daughters while I was writing my dissertation upstairs? She did also graduate with honors from the University of Washington, and that's about as much as I'll tell you right now. Gloria, it's all yours. My roommate of over almost 50 years.
Thank you later. Thank you, John. Well, thank you very much for being here. I'm used to being in the basement. I love the basement. I'm very nervous about being in front of people, so I'm going to try to speak slowly and do my best. Jonathan's already made me more nervous by, teasing me, but that's okay. That's okay. I'm really excited to show you some of my favorite photographs from the Brauer Museum. We have a terrific collection of photographs, starting as early as the one way down there by John, Carlton Watkins, 1878, up until the Dawood Bay. I'm sure you've seen it's a huge diptych, close-ups of an African-American girl and an African-American woman, and that came in 2015. I don't know so much about digital photography as I do other photography, so I'm focusing on the analog photography, which is the camera and the film. So I started my interest in photography when I was a little girl. Two of my older brothers had a dark room in one of their houses, and they let me come in and just watch and kind of see what was going on. And it is magic, and it's still magic. Oh, so many years later, to develop a picture and to see it come up out of the chemicals, it is just magic. So then I took classes in high school and in college, and then here with Amy Tomaszek, where we learned to use a large format camera, and I took a number of graduate classes with her. So this is my large format camera. It's called a Crown Graphic, and they came out in 1947 from Graflex, incorporated in Rochester, New York. This holds a negative, which is 4x5. So we might be used to a negative that's a 35 millimeter. You have a roll of them on, or you used to have a roll of them on your camera, 36 pictures. But so think of the 35 millimeter, and then this is what I'm using. those go into a film holder like this, and I have two of my fellow students here so they know what I'm talking about. And this holds 2 pieces of film. And this slides into the back of your camera when you're ready to take a shot. So when I first started taking pictures, I had 3 of these, which meant I had 6 pictures I could take. These have to be loaded in a dark room. So you just don't go out and snap your camera like you're not thinking about it, because you have 6 pictures to take. You got to think about it. You've got to concentrate. Do I really want to take that picture? Is this the one I really want? Now the light's not good enough. All that stuff goes through your mind. And so I want to talk about that in terms of some of these photographs. So remember my 4x5 negative. Okay, I'm going to go over to talk about our first photograph, which is Carlton Watkins. It was done in, I'm walking away from my notes, so now I'm really nervous. Carlton Watkins, it was in 1878. I'm going to have you hold it, yes. And he started doing photographs in the Yosemite Valley, and he was a highly acclaimed photographer of early Western photographs. He helped preserve the Yosemite Valley to become later, in 1890, a national park. He did this by making photographs. They were later seen by Lincoln and by Congress, who then adopted this land to save it. So when he went out to the Yosemite Valley, he had a camera that he had specially built. It was so much bigger than that, and I do need you to hold this. His negative, okay, mine's 4x5. His negative was 18 by 22, or 22 by 18. That's huge, huge. And it isn't the film like I have here, it's glass. They're made out of glass. They started making glass negatives in 1850, and at first you had to carry you had to carry them with you, and they're heavy. You had to carry a portable darkroom with you, because you had to put the emulsion, which is a number of, I tried to memorize it and I just couldn't. It's a number of chemicals where there's silver nitrates in it, which the light reflects on to make your picture. But you have to prepare that. The first negatives were, the glass ones were wet, so you have to prepare that on site, and you have 5 minutes to take your picture. Remember, it's this big. You're carrying that with you. You've got your portable darkroom. Look where, and you're not going to be able to see from way over there, but come afterwards and look. He's in this valley. He's climbed. He's gone over stuff. He's hauling all his equipment, and he sets up to take the picture, but he has to do it quickly because he's got like 5 minutes, or he has to wait till the light is right to prepare the negative, then to take the picture. And in his career, he did over 1,200 of these glass negatives. So I just think, oh my gosh, I mean, hauling that stuff and carrying that stuff, you know, I think I have a lot to carry, but you know. So anyway, an amazing photographer, really helped get people to know about this area in the Yosemite Valley. The next one, I want to talk more about this picture in a second, but the next one is by William Richardson. He lived from 1875 to 1936. He was a chemist at a meat packing company in Chicago. Now this keeps making pop, pop, pop sounds. Is it too high, too low? Can you hear me? Okay, okay. So he was a very good chemist, but he was very interested in photography. And as a boy, he drew and studied birds. He loved birds. So when he started learning how to take photographs, he wanted to photograph birds as well. So he would climb up into a tree with all his equipment. Again, this doesn't have a date for the photograph, but it says it's between 1910 and 1920. So he's carrying all his equipment. He would sit in a tree for hours waiting for a bird to hatch or an owl to do something, or he just waited and waited, and he got the most incredible photographs of birds. But he was also very interested in the untamed wilderness, or places. And so he would come to the dunes, because back then the dunes was still, very wild. Thank you. Thank you. It's going to be a group effort here. And he and his wife both were part of the environmental groups that started early on, like Friends of the Native something, Friends of the Native Dunes, no, Friends of the Native, and the Prairie Club. I'm losing it, and it's over there in my notes. But anyway, they really wanted to help maintain this area as well as he's doing over here. Now you can see, even maybe from far away, there's quite a difference between these photographs, and later you can come up and look at them, because I really want you to notice that. What Richardson is doing in the early 1900s is he and other photographers want to move away from just documenting what they see or taking portraits of what they see. They want to do something different. They want their artworks to look painterly. They want it to look not like a photograph. So there's a group that he was a member of a group called the Photo Sessionists, or Photo Session, and it started in Europe and it came to the United States in 1902. And Stieglitz, who I did not include, is the best known American photo secessionist in the United States. But what they're doing while taking pictures and working in the darkroom is they're softening edges, they're using lenses, they're using filters, they're having it a little out of focus. To me, when I first started looking at some of his, they almost look like a charcoal drawing. They don't look like a photograph. And so this is what these photographers in the early 1900s wanted to do, because they wanted their photographs to be considered fine art. They didn't want this distinction between photography and fine art. So when you look at these two and come up afterwards, this is so crisp. This is so clear. This is so focused. You can see a little teeny pond back there, or maybe it's a big lake, but in this, the detail, the branches, it is so clear and crisp. This is blurry. This has soft edges. It's not really defined, and that was what the artist was wanting to do. So a very different kind of photograph is being done early on. So now we go to Ansel Adams, who is probably the best-known photographer in America, and he lived in 1902 to 1984. This is called Monolith Half Dome, and when he started out, he was a pianist, and he wanted to be a pianist. He wanted to be a photographer. Very good pianist, but he had to decide which route he was going to take. He could have been a concert pianist. He was that good, and as we all know, he chose photography. He probably still played the piano on the side, but this piece is from 1926, and it's from his early career. It's when he's in the Sierra Madres. It's from his first portfolio from that area. And again, when you can get closer to this, these little black things, those are the tops of trees. Now think how far he climbed and how much he had to climb and how he had to carry his equipment. He didn't have as big a negatives as Watkins. He had smaller negatives, and later on, they were produced at a company, and you could buy them already with the emulsion on, and that made it much easier. You didn't have to carry your portable darkroom. Anyway, when I'm talking about having 6 shots, when we started out taking photo together, we had 6 pieces of film with us, and that was it. He was carrying his stuff up. He's deciding what picture to take. He's probably taken some on the way. He's waiting for the light to be good, to be perfect. And he realizes he has 1 glass negative left. So then, should I take it? Is this the shot? Is the light right? Do I want to wait? What do I do? And it becomes one of his most famous pictures, and it was his last negative. All of us have these famous ones too, right? Our 6th one is so famous. Anyway, so he was very important and helpful in and again, preserving areas by having people see his photographs so that they were saved for parks and for other people to see. The next two photographs here, I'm going to try to get out of the way and catch up on my notes, see what I missed. Anyway, okay, this is by Arthur Rothstein, and it was, it's called Dust Storm, Cimarron County. It was taken in 1936. This, Dorothea Lange, migrant mother, it was taken in 1936. I'm sure you have all seen these photographs. They're iconic. They're in every history book. I bet you, Zeke, you saw them in your history class books in high school, right? They were there. Everyone knows these. And what happened was that there was the government formed an agency called the Farm Security Administration, and it was a New Deal project in 1937 to go out, to hire photographers to go out and take pictures of the rural poverty and the poor who were suffering from the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. And it was trying to help to get these relief packages and things going, you know, for these people. So these aren't the only two photographers, but these are two of the nation's premier documentary photographers and photojournalists. They were major. But what happened with these two and a lot of the other photographers that were hired for this Farm Security Administration, they didn't see their pictures. They didn't process their film. The film was sent to back to the agency. The agency, you know, had someone else developing it, someone else printing the pictures and dispersing them. So sometimes they never even saw the shots that they had taken. Now this picture was purchased in 1987, and it was, I think, for $35. The negatives are held in the Library of Congress, so if you want to get some of these photos, you can do that. And Richard bought a set of them for the museum, or I should say the whole museum council did, bought a set of these. So they're not a valuable picture. The other ones that we have that I've talked about would be considered vintage prints. Now, a vintage print is when you have a photograph, you take a photograph, and within about 2 years, they say, you developed that photograph. So these are developed in 87, but they were taken in 36. And this one, you know, really doesn't have a monetary value. This one, Arthur Rothstein printed himself. He didn't print them back in 36, but he printed a set of them in 81, and it was he had a limited edition of 300. This is 262, and he did that to make a deal for universities and libraries and schools to be able to acquire one of these photos, and it wasn't as expensive. It was still expensive, but it wasn't as expensive if you're going to try to buy a vintage print. Now, one of the things that people talk about, should we even have something that's not a vintage print in a museum collection? Is it important? This is invaluable, yet it's still insured and it's still handled with care. You watch the people putting it up. But sometimes people think it's not necessary to have in the collection. But these two pieces have been used in so many classes at VU. History classes, writing classes, economic classes, psychology class, anything you can think of, talking about these images. So they have been used so much more than some of the pieces that are worth a lot more money but don't get out of the vault as much. So these are really, really, I think, important pieces. I want to tell you about what Rothstein said about this photograph, and it has to do with that being just the number 6 negative for, thank you, Adams, how things just happen that way. So Rothstein says, I was about to get into my car, he recalls, when I turned to wave to Art Coble and his 2 sons. And I looked and saw this man bending into the wind with one of the boys in front of him and another one behind, and great swirls of sand all around, which made the sky and the earth become one. And I said, what a picture this is. And I just picked up my camera and went click. 1 photograph, 1 shot, 1 negative. So that doesn't happen very often. He was very lucky to get this, and it is full of emotion as this is, and it's so much happening. So this is one of my favorite pieces. And he did more in the darkroom with it later. He didn't handle it in 37 or 36, but he worked with it later on and made it actually larger than the original size. But it was a neat thing that these were made available to places like the Brauer Museum. Okay. This work is by Harry Callahan. It's called Chicago, done in 1950. Harry Callahan became interested in photography when he worked for the Chrysler company in Detroit. And he took he joined a camera club. And so this group is taking pictures and things like that. And then he was still interested. He went to a lecture by Ansel Adams. And that sold him. He just sold. And he just continued to learn. He's a self-taught photographer. He didn't take any classes in it, but he just kept studying and learning and doing his own work. And he did teach at the Chicago School of Design and at the Rhode Island School of Design. He taught photography. So that's how well he learned it. But his first solo show was in Chicago in 1951. Did I already say that? Okay, good. I thought you looked at it. Okay, I repeated that. No. One of the things about this photo that I really like is the starkness. Obviously, it's in winter. We have no leaves on the trees. All this, the black of the trees. We have snow, and in the background, this is up against the lake, which you can't really see, Lake Michigan. It's the same color as the sky. But the way he does that, you get when you come up and look more closely, there's a little teeny mark there that would distinguish the lake. He did kind of, to me, his photographs are lonely and empty, but in a good way. He photographed things that he loved. He did so many photographs of his wife. So that's nice, he loved her. So that's a good thing, you know. And there's really a really interesting one where she's in the water, and she's got long hair, and the water's around here. So you see the movement of the water, and you see the movement of her hair, but then you just see her head. And it's just kind of like it's floating there. It's just very, very strange, almost surrealist, but I really like his work. He also started to deal with doing double negatives. Now, and that is, if you had your film, let's see where my film went. I lost my film. Oh, well, you know what that film looked like. If you put that in the camera, you take a picture. But then you take another picture on the same piece of film. It's going to be a double negative, or a double shot on one negative. And sometimes you get really interesting mistakes that you didn't even know were going to happen. But he really experimented a lot with that, with maybe just taking a shot and then shifting just a teeny bit so these trees would all have another little tree next to them that's kind of just a little bit off center. And so he really experimented a lot with more within the camera. Some people do a lot in the darkroom. So this is Art Sensabaugh. He studied with Harry Callahan. Thank you. He studied with him. Now, he was a major photographer in the early 60s, and he used an enormous camera, a huge camera, and his negative, smaller than Watkins, but it was 18 by 12. So you're going to have, it's much thinner. It's not more of like a square or a rectangle. But then when doing his photographs, and he did a lot in the Midwest, this is called Midwest Landscape 24, he crops the negative. So you see how narrow that is. I mean, it could have been a photograph up here or even more down here, but he crops them and makes these long horizontal shots to express how the landscape just goes on and on in the Midwest. You can just see forever, and it really extends. It's this huge expanse. And I don't think he would have the same effect if you had more of a squared off. This is a panoramic, but it's not with a panoramic camera. He built this gigantic, it was called a banquet camera, and had huge, the big negatives for it. But here, when you come up and look more closely, he's got trees, a railroad crossing, some buildings here, and then the telephone poles go in and they go this way. So it's showing you that there is depth, but most of them show this way to show this very large expanse. All right. This is my favorite photographer, and not just because of the nude, but this guy was incredible with what he could do in the darkroom. He was just, I had a good word for him and I lost it, so I'm going back here to say what that word is. I know he was a pioneer in working in the darkroom, but he also, master. That's not that hard. He was a master at what he was doing. And he took shots, he took, his film shots, but where he did most of the work was in the darkroom. Now, I don't know if any of you have been in darkrooms to know how they work, but what you have is an enlarger that's like an upside-down camera. You put your negative in, and it shoots down, and down here you put your photographic paper. And there's all sorts of controls and things you have to do, very similar to the camera. And you're only in red light. It's dark, except for the red light. But this is a series of negatives that he put together to make one photo montage, but it's seamless. You see no edges. You see no overlap. You see no place where you think, oh, that was probably from something else. He has 3 or 4 enlargers set up. He would maybe on the first one do the woman. Maybe on the second one, he's doing this stuff. Maybe on the third one, it's something up here, and something on the fourth. But as you do that, you have to be careful of how much time you're exposing, because if this is the first one that goes through, that's going to get a lot more time and exposure than the rest of the film. So it's all calculation and figuring it out, and that's what I love most about taking photographs, is working in the darkroom. I like taking pictures, but I love working with the enlarger and manipulating maybe the focus of your film, or you use a filter, or there are a couple of tools you use that I forgot to say that the secessionists used as well. Sometimes they used a sepia tone, where you've seen kind of like a warm brown color to the photograph. Those made them softer. They also used something called dodging and burning. Now, dodging is a way that you have a tool, like it's a little round circle on a wire, and you're going to wiggle it under the light that comes down to keep light off a certain area, because you don't want it to get too much light. Or you burn. You put a hole in a piece of cardboard, and you're going to let the light come through, and you're going to burn more light into a certain area, which is going to bring up more detail. So anyway, he used all those techniques, and I'm sure more. I've tried to do this just with 2 enlargers, and it was hard. It was really hard to figure out your exposure time, to figure out, how much time for, and then, but it was fun. It was worth it. And I've tried a couple of double negatives within the camera, once just because I forgot to turn my film, and another time because I thought I'd try to do that. So anyway, but I mostly just talked about, I love how these people took pictures, what they had to do to get those pictures, and then how they worked on them. A lot of people don't know, you don't always get a perfect photograph. You have to work with that negative sometimes in the darkroom for hours to get the light right, to get this right, to block out that, to do this. And so sometimes you're spending much more time in the darkroom than you ever did taking the picture. But this kind of shows the people who took the pictures, and then some of the developing issues that I really like. So the Brauer has a terrific, terrific collection of photographs, and I just wanted to show you. And I thank the people who hung them, because I think I picked the most works of anybody to put up. But thank you all for being here. Thank you so much. Okay. Anyone questions? Oh, well, I wasn't going to, but they snuck it up here. Yeah. I took that in Rome. I had went with John. This is not when we lived there, but later. And Richard Brauer had agreed that I could do a show of my photographs in the law school, because that was before this building. And so he would put shows in the law school, the union, and the library. And so he agreed to let me have a show over there, and John had a poetry reading at the same time, and it was a lot of fun. So that, and then the dean of the law school liked 2 of my photographs and actually purchased them for the collection. So I'm very honored to be in the collection. So anyway. Well, this is actually before I had a 4x5, so this is a 35 millimeter, and that is about as far as you can make it big before it becomes grainy. Because when you've seen pictures when you try to stretch them out and they do get grainy. So out of 35 millimeter, you can't do that very well. With Watkins, with that huge 18 or 22 by 18 negative, that is so big and has so much more information that can get into that negative that can be made much bigger. So that was a 35 millimeter, and this was this little Tempietto we found in Rome, and we hadn't seen it before, and I like to do detail, and I like to take pictures of buildings, either broken down, or this one was not broken down. I don't like to do people, because once somebody yelled at me and I got scared. So I don't do people anymore. So anyway, but it was, there were beautiful things to take pictures of in Rome. So, and at this time, there wasn't a dark room here. In the old art building, which is no longer here, Baldwin Hall, is over down by the law school, there was a dark room down there that I was able to use and to print the pictures for the show that we had at the law school. I think so, because the idea in a black and white photograph is you want blacks and you want whites and you want all the grayscales in between. That's what Ansel Adams was. He was a master at that. He was so good at that. And so some areas, like there's a black doorway or that shutter is black, but sometimes within the black there's something, so you don't want to get it so black that you can't see a little something, and that would be where you would dodge your little tool there to keep the light out of that area. Or something, or to bring up an area, you want a little more light here to bring this up. That might have been blown out and kind of white, but you want it to show a little more. So that you would do in the, rarely did you get a photograph that just worked and you didn't have to do anything to it, I think, Maybe that was me, I don't know. Okay. Oh, wait a minute, you got to do so the people at home can hear.
Being a digital photographer, I was just curious, is the museum collecting anything that's digital nowadays, and what's the difference between collecting a digital versus collecting analog?
Well, I think, yes, they do collect digital, and there are some very important photographers there now. Like this one I said, Dawood Bey, very big name in photography, but it is digital. Can you think of any other ones we recently got that were digital? But we have had some. We have had some color digital as well, but that is so much harder to produce a color. No, not color digital, I meant color prints. But there have been a number of things collected, but it has to be a pretty, I think, big name artist to get into the collection with digital work.
Any plans to do a photography analog exhibit for the whole place in the future?
Great idea. I'll look at the schedule.
Any other questions? Oh, Ed just met.
My ignorance, historically, where did daguerreotypes fit in with the early things?
Before this.
Before this,
That's
yeah.
an albumen print,
Yeah.
the Watkins. So I tried to learn what albumen print, and that follows the daguerreotype. So before the albumen, after the daguerreotype, let me find my sheet on albumen. It is, I have it. That's probably it. Silver gelatin, I'm sorry, just a minute. Okay, so albumen was, I don't know it completely, that followed the daguerreotype. They say that the daguerreotypes are the best photographs, but they're hard to keep, store them or preserve them and stuff like that. So when you're doing an albumin, it's with egg. There's an egg separation, an egg mixture that you put your paper into. So it's so much isn't that it's a special kind of film or something. It's the way it was developed in this egg mixture with other stuff. And it was developed in France and very popular until the 1850s here when they started getting the glass plates. So, sorry I can't answer that better.
No, it's okay. Yeah. It's Frank Brady, right, who did a lot of the Civil War daguerreotypes.
Yeah.
I have one of a relative, and you have to keep it in the dark.
Yes,
Which makes it hard to show.
Hard to show, yeah, it does, yes. I also was going to mention one of my things that I just found out, and I had been mentioning of how many of photographers did these Farm Security Agency photographs, and the negatives went to the Library of Congress. They have 175,000 negatives from the photographs taken during that time. And so I'm sure that Richard had a way of picking out what they wanted and what they were going to use and what would be best for the collection. But I just think so many of those people really worked hard at taking those photographs, and they just went into storage. The negatives probably never printed, you know. Yes?
I like the way you described the way the Farm Security Administration photographers did not have total control. One looks to the artist, really, to decide not only on what picture to take, but how to print it. And for instance, in this, I forget the name of it.
This Dust Bowl?
Dust Bowl.
Yeah, Dust Storm, Cimarron County.
Cimarron Dust Bowl. That photograph, when it was printed, apparently they looked at it and saw that the subject matter seemed to be all in the middle. And why we don't have enough room in our publication to put in all the sky and all the foreground. And we'll just we'll focus in on the action. And you can see that the photographer, when he saw his picture represented that way, was affronted. And he supervised and paid for, and I don't know how he arranged for it, but he had an edition printed with cropping as he wanted it. Mm-hmm. And the size, notice how big that is compared with the others here. And so when one looks for a photograph, like a black and white printed one, you really want to see not only who took the picture, but who printed it.
That's right, who printed it, yes.
And approved how it's to look.
Yeah. And that's probably why he did these himself. He did this series, he printed those himself,
yes.
that it says.
I remember receiving the notice.
Yeah.
And realizing what a prize that would be to have.
Right, yeah. Ed Euling told me about a book that is huge, but it's a story of Dorothea Lange. And the chapters of when she is at the Farm Security, working for them, and taking the pictures. And first of all, she was a woman photographer at the time, and that was a problem. And it just was so hard. She also had polio, right? And she had trouble climbing or getting up places to take photographs, but it's an intrigue. Even if you just read that chapter, it's really good. But she really, really struggled, but it was the kind of work she wanted to do. She didn't want to do portraits anymore. She had been known for her portraits, and she didn't want to do that anymore. So she took a lot of these other jobs on, that required physical strength and going and being away from her kids and all that kind of stuff. But it's a really interesting book about her. Yes? Oh.
Gloria, were you here when they had the Ansel Adams show of the ones that he had come back to his photographs later and reprinted them differently? Can you talk about that a little bit? I'm not a photographer, but you
Okay.
will have noticed things.
Okay, yes. Ansel Adams did a lot of his work 8 by 10, sometimes a little bit bigger. But the show that the Brauer got, and I can't remember the year, but it was in this building. I think Greg was a director at the time. It was from the Friends of Ansel Adams. There was an organization in San Francisco that put together this show. And so it all came as a package deal. They were all framed alike. There were many, I mean, we filled this gallery, that middle wall, and that gallery, and possibly the one over there. There were so many photographs. And they were done, let me check that date. Okay, he died in '84. And I'm not sure when they were, if he did the printing or when they were printed, but they were printed much larger than he usually did. And unfortunately now that organization is no longer functioning, and who knows what happened to all those photographs then. But yeah, that was from that photo show. Yeah. It did him, yes. Right. Yes, yes, yeah. Yeah, it was a real interesting show, very good, yeah.
Anyone else?
Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you.
Let's see if I can find my notes now.
Afterwards, please come up and look at the photographs. I made them hang, so many of them. You gotta look at them, you know.
That concludes our third season of Thursdays at the Brauer. Here's hoping we'll be back for season 4 next March. Before we sign off, I want to thank Tricia Milam, Dean of Library Services, for her generous support. Also Cynthia Rutz, who's here, who supported the colloquium. Where's Cynthia? Yes, and has been a big champion of this program. We want to thank Amanda, who is our videographer. Mitch Moss is not here, but he made sure that we had these microphones and these speakers so that you could hear us. We're hoping that the people who zoomed in can also hear us. We're hoping that these videos will be available. If you have friends who want to see these, they can ask me, and I'll try to get you connected. I want to thank the presenters, Ben Brobst-Renault, Hope Bierman, Jenny Pro, Jonathan Canning, also our great host. Jonathan, thank you. You saw what it takes to put up the works, and we did this 7 times, and it was a pleasure.